Here at Pulsegate Games, we talk about all things tabletop. Not that kind of tabletop. This kind of tabletop. And that includes cosplay. So if you've ever wondered how to print a helmet, let's talk about it. When I first bought my 3D printer, I was super excited to start printing miniatures. I loved printing miniatures, and I have printed hundreds of them with both of my printers, and I loved doing that. Okay, but when you have 3D printers, sometimes you start looking for other things to print. And so I thought, what else can I print? And slowly I started looking into helmets, because who doesn't want a helmet from your favorite game? Who doesn't want an Iron Man helmet, or a Black Panther helmet, or in my case, a Warhammer helmet? And so I thought, I can print one. This should be easy, right? Yes and no. So let's talk about that. We're going to go over a couple of the things that I learned in my process of printing a helmet. And the first thing I want to talk about is where you get the file. Okay, there are Patreons, there are companies out there that have tons of different helmet files. I'll put a link to a couple in the comments that I have seen, and I thought, oh man, they do a really good job. Okay, but these companies, they go through the work. They make sure these helmets fit you properly. They give you the tools that you need to change the size to fit your head perfectly, because obviously, we don't all have the same head. One of the other members of Pulsegate Games printed a Daredevil helmet, and he thought, oh yeah, this will be perfect. Well, only his kids can wear it because it was a little too small. And as you saw from my helmet, this guy is big. This is a large helmet, and when I put it on my head, it looks like I have a big head. But that's okay, because ultimately, if I ever print a full suit of armor, it's got to be big. And so when I have the full suit of armor, the head won't look so big. But I lucked out. I found the file for that on Thingiverse. It was a free file. And you're not going to get a ton of support with free files. So just kind of keep that in mind as you print something. For me, being my first helmet, I thought it was awesome. Have I found better models for Warhammer helmets out there? Yeah, I've seen a few. And so in the future, if I print another one, which I plan to, I will definitely do the homework beforehand to find a better model. So up next on my list is something I did not think about beforehand, but I feel like everyone should know going into it. Doing a helmet is hard. It is a lot of work. I mean, you have to find the file. You have to print the file. That helmet took a whole spool of FDM. It took a whole roll of FDM to print, plus a little bit more. And then once it's all done, because my printer wasn't a giant printer, I had to print it in pieces. So I had to put those pieces together. Once those pieces were together, I had to sand the helmet down to make it smooth. And I sanded it for hours. And I feel like I did an okay job, but I could have done better. And on my next helmet, I will do better. And it was just a lot of work to get everything put together for it. And so just know that before you're going into this, it's not an easy thing that you can do in an afternoon. I mean, the people that can do it in an afternoon are the ones that have been doing it for a long time. But for your first time, it's going to take a while. So just be patient with yourself and make sure you have ample time and ample materials to put everything together. Along with that, when you print this out, if you do have to print your helmet in pieces, sand it while it's in pieces. Sand it while you have the individual piece to yourself, because you can hold it in one hand. You can just sand it nice and easy. You don't have to deal usually with a lot of, nooks and crannies and things like that. You can just sand one piece at a time, and it just makes it easier when you put it all together. If you're anything like me, then you just glued the thing together because you wanted to see it. You had to have it in your hands before you finished it. And so you glued it together and it's got a lot of blemishes, it's got a lot of holes, it's got a lot of pockets, things like that that need to be taken care of, Bondo is your best friend. You can buy a tube of Bondo for $4 at Walmart, and you can just use that to cover everything. I covered probably almost half of this helmet with Bondo and then sanded it, and it fixed most of the problems. Okay, Bondo is not very, it's not a very thick consistency. I mean, it's like a really thick paint that you put on, so it's not going to hold a shape. So if you need to do like sharp edges and things like that, it's not going to be your best friend. You're better off using like some milliput or green stuff. Whatever you need to do those sharp edges. Okay, but for the overall helmet, Bondo's your best friend. Use it.
What? Did we just become best friends?
So I talked earlier about how you print it out in these little pieces. And once you have all your little pieces sanded, you got to put them together. And there's multiple ways you can do that. You can use super glue. You can use other adhesive. The thing that worked best for me was when I would take the super glue to bond everything together, and then I went over it and I welded the cracks. I welded the seams. And I've talked about this in other videos, but what it means is you take that filament, the little bits that you have left behind, which I'm sure if you have a 3D printer, you got some of this somewhere. And you just line it up with those cracks and then use a soldering iron to heat it up and just weld it down into those cracks. And it makes a solid connection. And if you do a good job with sanding, you won't even be able to see those. You won't be able to see those creases and things like that in the helmet after you've soldered them, and you have a really good, strong, it's not going anywhere connection. And so I feel like that's probably the best way to put those pieces together, especially for a helmet and any other big things that you may be 3D printing. And just remember that when it comes to the size of the helmet, just like with my friend, big you can still use, small it goes to somebody else. So if you got to make the helmet and you're not 100% sure what the size should be, err on the size of big. You can still use it. Will it look as good? No, it'll look a little silly, but at least you'll be able to wear it. So big is still good. Something that I learned, and I had to learn the hard way, is that my printer was having some issues when I printed some of these pieces. And so the layer lines were really big. There were some pieces that weren't as clean as they should have been. And I thought to myself, what does it matter? I'm going to sand this thing together. I'm going to put Bondo on it and everything else like that. It should still work. Reprint the piece. If it comes out and it's got a lot of issues, just reprint it. Yeah, you'll lose a couple bucks in your filament, but in the long run, you'll save yourself a few hours of time. Like I said, almost half of my helmet had to be covered in Bondo because I used those pieces. And they're never going to be as strong as the other ones are. So if you want that durability and strength in the things that you print, make sure you're not using the pieces that are too damaged. Recycle them, do something else with them. Use the good pieces for your helmet. You'll thank yourself later, I promise. And the last thing I want to say is one of the things I say a lot. Yeah, it might be hard. Yeah, it might take a lot of time. But in the end, there's no better feeling than holding that thing that you've created in your hands, than putting that helmet on your head, than holding that gun or sword in your hands. So get out there and do it. Get out there and print. If your world takes you into the cosplay domain, do it. Have fun doing it. Keep in mind those things I've talked about when you print your own stuff, just because it'll make the process a little easier. And if you have any questions, let me know. I would love to help you making whatever it is you want to make, making your world come complete. So, like, subscribe, follow the channel. We're just going to keep building worlds together. And as always, just remember, don't spend so much time building your world that you forget to spend some time in it. Until next time.